Hey, good morning, because we're actually recording in the morning.
Yeah,
Welcome
we are.
to Not for Sunday Mornings. I'm Chris, and this is Steve.
Yes, it is.
And wow, we had a good sermon on Sunday.
It was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I hope people enjoyed it.
Yeah. So this last Sunday was Father's Day, and we talked about Father Abraham, right?
He did.
And we got a little song from Steve.
Yes, we did.
And
Very good song.
for those of you who didn't see the sermon yet, go watch it. And
Yep.
watch him sing and watch him
Dance.
perform. He dances too. That's true.
Yeah. Pretty much a 5-star talent. What do they call that?
You know, I would go with the word Renaissance man. You know, like you just do everything. And so,
Have you seen me fish too? I'm a heck of a fisherman.
are you?
Yeah. Anyways,
Oh, I did. I saw some of the fish you caught
Yeah.
when you're on your little fishing treat. Yeah. All right.
Pretty cool.
So before we really dive into anything,
Yes.
you've been hitting me up with all these theme songs, and so I thought I can do better.
Really? You think you
Well,
can do
I don't know
better?
that I can do better because I just don't have the time to put into 5 different songs, 6 different. I don't even
That I
know
do?
how many you've thrown
I've
in my
made like
direction.
40 songs.
Okay.
I've given you a couple.
So I gave you one. I
Okay.
sent you one this morning.
I haven't listened to it yet.
You have not listened to it. A little bit different style than the styles we've been going with here. So I wanted to give a little more, variety up to the listeners.
Okay. And does this have like a watermark because you didn't pay for it or something? Or? Probably.
Probably. It was part of a free trial.
Oh, great. All right. Let me play it.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see what you think.
All right. Here we go. I like it. We're like at a club.
Chris and Steve are on the mic tonight, dropping truth bombs in the neon light. Melchizedek moments make the room ignite. Not for Sunday mornings, but it feels so right. Not for Sunday mornings, but we're bringing the heat. Knowledge now gets served up, oh so sweet. Faith and fun collide, kids stay in your seat. Not for Sunday mornings, but it's what you need.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like it a lot. Yeah.
All right, we'll see what they
Good
think.
lyrics.
Yeah.
Good lyrics. Yeah. That was fun.
Genesis.
How long did it take you to do that?
More tries than I'd like to. I couldn't figure out the program very well. It was like very limited, and I'm like,
You had 50 free downloads and you used 48 of them.
I used 4.
I liked it.
Yeah. Oh, good. We'll see
Speaking of
what
liking
the audience
things-
thinks.
Yeah, all 2 of them. Actually, we have. I just got a thing. We have 75 downloads on our podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
So when
I don't know what that number means.
inside baseball, because I don't know, like you've got the whole thing running through your account, and so
Yeah.
do you see across all the different platforms, or
That's just some number. I don't know what it's from.
Okay.
It doesn't count YouTube.
okay? Because I
Or
look at
Spotify.
YouTube's the one I look at just to see where we are with
Yeah.
subscribers and whatnot. So like one of our videos had like 41.
What?
Yeah. I think it was either the first one or the Rahab one. Like those were
Huh.
2 big ones, I think.
Wow, blowing up.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, let's see. All right. So
Well, wait, we got to tell people what they got to do. Smashed.
Oh, we haven't said that for a while. Smash that like button.
Don't do that.
Subscribe to our channels.
Don't do it. Don't waste your time.
They obviously aren't listening anyways. And
Hey, no, people are. People
Yeah,
are.
it is.
We're
It's
very
good.
grateful. Very grateful.
People have come up to us, so I know people are listening, and we are grateful. Hope you are enjoying yourself. All right, things we liked.
Things you liked.
Gosh, okay. So Abraham's a huge story. So it was kind of funny. I was thinking coming into Abraham after Noah, we had the first 6 chapters, right? We really skipped one story in
Yeah.
all of Genesis, and Abraham really fills out the remainder of that book. And so he's a big component, big part to it. So I loved how you told the story in 4 acts, right? Like you had here's each part of his life, and really, it's written that way. It's an interesting growth thing, and so like just going through that and pointing out the important parts that really are flowing through there.
And there's still so much more. That's.
I know.
like-
There was so much that was left out.
I mean,
'cause it's-
later in his life too. That was early life.
Yeah.
It's like, man.
yeah, getting up just to that. Yeah, because we never covered like
Isaac, his son.
and so there's a lot that goes on in there that. And again, just time and
Yeah.
picking what part of the story are we going to tell, right?
Yeah, yeah.
and talk through. So like that. Loved the, bringing in of Hagar and just that conversation piece and looking, telling her side of the story, because usually when we talk about Abraham, that part of the story gets left out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so just bringing that in and having that conversation piece about that.
And we're going to talk about her.
Yeah, today a little bit
too.
more.
Yeah,
because there's definitely more that we can cover into there.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
And Abraham's one of those interesting. I mean, every character is an interesting character, and the beauty of the Bible is all of them are flawed, horribly flawed. And so, like, digging into all of his character flaws and everything that he does. But what I love the most is that you come in and you wrapped it up, and you said, like, we could sit here and we could look at him as this, and we could look at him as broken and as a screw up and as a mess, but in the end, how does the Bible actually see him?
Yeah.
And so you go in, where we kind of have landed with a lot of our characters.
Yeah, not intentionally.
No, it's not, because when we picked these characters, we did not go to Hebrews 11. It just so happens that part of the reason I think we learn about them is because they are mentioned in there. They have a name in the New Testament that they're important enough to the story that we get to talk about them.
Yeah.
And so you talk about how Hebrews 11 brings that up. But the thing I love the most was your quote from George Morrison.
Yeah. I'm gonna start studying that guy. I have a book of his. I never knew about him before I read this quote.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't heard of him before either. And so,
pretty neat dude.
But the quote was, just so we can get it out there again, the victorious Christian life is a series of new beginnings.
Yeah.
And to really tie that into, like, and you look at Abraham's life, and Abraham wasn't a Christian, but he's an example, right? He's an example that Christianity holds up in Hebrews, and so, like, he lies, right? He cheats, he doesn't steal, but I mean, like, he just has a screw up after screw up after screw up, but he goes back each and every time.
Yeah.
He doesn't let it define him. And he keeps on trying and going and going and going.
Yeah. And what's neat is God doesn't let that define him either. Like,
right.
God's always there to restore him and bring him back. And yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So I know you peppered me with a whole bunch of questions last week.
One question. Oh, I had a bunch. Yeah.
You did have a bunch, which is fine. Like, I love that. That's part of the greatness of this, is to kind of really dig in and dig through. So I know this was about Abraham, but we couldn't talk about Abraham without talking about Sarah, right? And so you told the part of the story where Sarah, and the line I highlighted was, because I made a note in here. It was about Sarah and giving up on the idea of being pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here. Look at Sarah's words. The Lord prevented me. What does that say about her view of God?
Yeah.
That he would make a promise and then just tease her with it, but not just tease her actively, prevent it from happening. Like he's some kind of cosmic prankster, which I
Wasn't that cool?
I love that. That was a great line. Just laughing at her as she continues to trust in his foolish promise. I know God said this, but he obviously changed his mind. Look around. We still have no kids and we aren't getting any younger. So listening to this sermon both times, like, for whatever reason, like, that ticked in my brain the second time. And again, not intentionally, that these things just happened to fall in Hebrews. And I found it interesting how Hebrews looked at Sarah.
Yeah.
Like, I know this was a story about Abraham, but the opening of Hebrews 11, like, really hits Abraham hard, but it hits Sarah hard too.
Yeah.
And so Hebrews 11:11, it says, by faith, even Sarah herself, when she was unable to have children, received power to conceive offspring, even though she was past the age, since she considered that the one who had promised was faithful. So it's just kind of interesting. Like, we know what her faith journey is.
Yeah.
On that,
Yeah.
we know that she's incredulous to begin with.
Yep.
And then it never happens, and she becomes even more jaded about the promise.
Yeah.
But yet, when Hebrews 11 writes about her and puts her into that Hall of Heroes, it talks about how by faith, even though none of this is possible, she considered the one who had promised to be faithful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which says a lot. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
It just kind of it got me thinking. You know,
What's your question?
where she was at. So
Chris's questions are just about him talking.
Yes, it is. Yes. So I guess my question is like, so how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile what Genesis says about her versus what Hebrews is saying about her?
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I don't know.
Or I guess what's your interpretation of what Genesis was saying about her?
Yeah, I mean, I think her faith is our faith is on a spectrum, right? So it's, you know, where what does faith really look like? Is it way over here? Is it somewhere in the middle? And so maybe perhaps she had just a little bit of faith, but not enough faith. Because after this prevented me stuff, she'll actually laugh at God a little bit later. There's a scene where the people come and visit her, and then she denies even laughing at God, and he said, "No, you laughed at me," and blah blah blah. And so I don't know if at that point she said, "Oh, this is going to be something real now." You know, when did that faith like switch to a full on?
Yeah.
Well, I'm all in. I don't know, but at this point, it doesn't feel like she has faith.
Right.
Where she says, "The Lord prevented me." Obviously, she didn't, because the Lord prevented me.
Right.
I'm going to help him out.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so,
well, and two, it's also, I think, part of like, it's a common theme even with us. Like, well, it's not on my timeline.
yeah,
You know, like I know that this is what's supposed to happen, but it's not happened yet, and I thought it would happen by now, and so now what do I have to do to make it happen?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
That 100%. I think you gauge faith by the hour for sometimes. You know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I got faith now, but that boy. you
Yep.
know,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, spectrum. It's a mountain and valley.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like there's times you're on the mountain and there's times you're not, and but you have that ability to get back up there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I agree.
So, anyways, yeah, that was my
That was your hard hitting question.
hard hitting question. Yeah. Well, it for people who go back and forth
Yeah.
between, it is a question to
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
You know, because it does define faith. You know, that's all Hebrews 11 is about. Is about
Yeah.
faith, right? And
Yeah.
so if we got a person in there who's like being held up to say this is what real faith looks like.
Yeah.
You know, and then we're looking here and like, well, what's really going on there? You know.
And I wonder if that's where we closed on that the faith journey isn't about being perfect; it's about being persistent, and that she stayed in it all the way through, even though maybe there were moments of doubt or moments of detours or moments of discouragement. She stayed in it. She didn't abandon. She didn't run away. She didn't say, "I'm out. I'm done."
Yeah.
Maybe she didn't have a choice in it, or maybe, but she stayed with it, and I think that's that persistent faith is what. That's why I love seeing older folks in our church and older believers who have lived this life and been faithful for 40, 30, 50 years, and it's just they've seen it all, they've done it all, and there's a perspective there that is just wonderful, and yeah.
So, okay, I got one more that came to me. So you ended going into the end of the sermon. How do we see this character? What's the one word that you would describe Abraham as?
I mean, I don't know. One word I would describe Abraham as.
Yeah.
Are you trying to get at something?
No, I'm curious.
I mean, one word is hard. I love the idea. I'm trying to think of a word that would fit into the idea of like falling, but getting back up, falling. You know, I guess tenacious. No, grit. Maybe stick-to-itiveness. He made some pretty big mistakes.
Mhm.
Made some pretty poor decisions, and then didn't let that define him. Like kept going back to God, kept returning to God, and so that idea of like one failure doesn't define him. I think. I don't know, but I don't know what a word for that is. One word. I don't know.
I think maybe when you said grit or
Yeah,
perseverance, maybe.
Yeah, that's a little bit of like what and that's I think what he has is that, and maybe why God called him, because he knew he had that personality trait of this is going to be a journey, and a journey is hard and not easy, but also you're going to get to the end. You know, eventually you're going to go to where I'm sending you. And
Do you feel like when he messed up, he was repentant of it?
oh yeah, I think so. I think so. It feels that way. I mean, when he falls on his face, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There are
17.
definitely a couple times.
Yeah.
When,
I think so. I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so the things that didn't make the cut. First of all, God spoke to Abram 7 times in Genesis, which I thought was kind of a neat little.
Oh,
Talk about numbers.
that's a fun number.
Yeah, and not so much.
Right.
but it was kind of a neat little thing. But I wanted to talk about chapter 15, 16, and 17. And 15, I have 3 C's: the covenant, Christology, and circumcision. Well, how cool is that? I should be preacher.
I like that. Yeah.
I know.
You should.
I should.
Are we paying you?
No.
Oh.
Not enough. Chapter 15. Here we go. I'm gonna get fired for that one. So in chapter 15, we begin with after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham on a vision. Fear not, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. And I talked a little bit about this, the mental health aspect of having fear and then what to do with that fear. And this is a journey of mine that has helped me out tremendously through talking through my counselor and stuff, is that catching our feelings when we see them and not allowing our feelings to run our life. Like, they don't drive the bus. And so I jump out and I scare you, you're going to be scared. Now, that initial fear, that's a biological response.
Right.
You don't have any control over that feeling.
Right.
And my theory is we don't have any control over our feelings. Our feelings come, but we do have control over what we do with our feelings. And so when you get scared, the fear comes, and then what do you do with that fear? Do you run and hide? Do you pee yourself? Do you allow that fear that now you're never going to walk around a corner again? Or do you recognize that, set it aside, and say, I'm going to still move forward?
Sure, yeah.
And I've used this story before where I went down to that preaching conference with all these fancy preachers and then me, like an idiot, and I was paralyzed in my room. I didn't want to get out of my room to go to the meetings because I felt like I shouldn't be here. I am the least qualified person. If they knew my story, they knew it. I'm an idiot. What am I doing sitting next to these people? And that fear had me hard. But then I was able to, in my room, recognize that and then set that aside and say, this fear is purposely here on purpose because it's trying to protect me, because potentially I could go in there and get harmed. Potentially I could go in there and be made a fool. Potentially this could be dangerous to me. So that part of my brain is doing its job. But also, it doesn't have to run my life. I can recognize it, set it aside, and still walk into something. And so I was able to do that. And for me, that was a big moment of growth, to catch that fear, set it aside, and walk into it. And so I think as we talk about mental health and as we talk about catching our emotions and our feelings, sometimes we feel bad because we have an emotion or we have a feeling. I don't think we can do that. We don't control that. I think our feelings and our emotions hit us. They just hit us. It's what do we do with those feelings and emotions? Do we allow them to drive the bus, or do we recognize them, set them aside, and say, nevertheless, I'm still going to go into that meeting. Nevertheless, I'm still going to make that phone call. I'm still going to go into, I'm not going to allow fear to drive the bus. Now, there's times when I'm tired and I'm weak, and whatever those emotions are do drive the bus. It's not perfect.
Right, yeah.
But I'm also better at catching them and setting them aside and then making the decision to step into whatever I'm stepping into. And so as I thought about this chapter with Abraham and the fears that he's facing, the first thing to hear God say, fear not, I think it's just such a beautiful moment of, I got you. You're not alone, And then down in chapter in verse 12, and we didn't get to talk about this, but as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. And when I was studying that this week, it came across The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross, which was a poem written, 18-something, I think, right? 1800 or something.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like the dark night of the soul isn't just a rough patch. It's the deep, disorienting season where everything feels like it's unraveling. It's marked by confusion, helplessness, and the haunting sense that God has gone quiet. It's not punishment, it's purification. It's God doing the hidden, hard work of stripping away everything we cling to, especially our need to be in control. It's the final letting go, the unfinishing of our will so that we can fully surrender to His. But on the other side, there's union, there's peace, there's purpose. The self, no longer driven by ego or fear, is grounded in something higher, ready to live fully in the presence and for the purposes of God. And I think one of my favorite things as a pastor is getting to sit with people as they go through these dark nights of the souls, these moments where they question everything and everything falls apart and they're just like, what do I do with this? And in those moments, I think the most important thing is just to stay put in that moment and not some people hit that moment and they abandon everything and they just, I'm done, I'm out, I'm done with faith, I'm done with the journey, I'm done. But to sit in those moments and to see what God might be doing in those moments, I think is beautiful. And God's doing something in this moment. He's going to show them some pretty dark things that are going to happen.
Oh, yeah, right.
But at the same time, here's the promise on the other side of that. So that was one of the things we didn't get to talk about.
So I love reading the covenants that God makes with His people. We talked about the Noah covenant.
Yeah.
And then this is the next one that really
this is a cool covenant.
And this is a really cool one. And when you read chapter 15 and actually read what happened, so God tells him to get these cows, right, these calves, and cut them in half, split them down the middle. and then he lays them out side by like lining a path almost, right?
yeah.
And he just kind of sits there and waits.
Yep.
Abraham does, waiting on God, because God's told him to do this, and he just doesn't know what to do, right? And so, long time ago, I forget how I found this. If it was something I read or something told me, but the idea of this covenant here is actually pretty amazing because the splitting of the animals is symbolic.
Yeah.
And it's symbolic of the person making the covenant. And so God is making this covenant with Abraham, right? This is not Abraham coming to God. This is God coming to Abraham. And essentially what ends up happening down the story is that the darkness comes, right? And then there's a couple really cool things that happen here. Number one, the sun sets and it becomes dark, and somehow it doesn't really describe what's going on here, except for a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch start to appear, and they pass between those divided animals. And so this is, and what I love about this is Abraham is before Moses, right? And so how does God lead the Israelites, right?
Yeah.
As a pillar of fire
Yeah,
and
that's
as a
very
pillar
cool.
of smoke.
That's
And so
very
you
cool.
have this symbolism that nobody understands up to this
Yeah,
point,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That is happening here. But the beauty of this too is when God is making this covenant, what he's saying is, I would rather be like these animals. I would rather be dead and split in half than break this covenant with
And
you.
that's the part. So that it's cutting a covenant is what this thing is called,
Yep.
where they would put the animals. And normally, what would happen is they would kill the animals, and then both people would
walk down it, yep.
between them, and symbolizing that if we break this covenant, then we're like these animals.
Yes.
What's different here is that, and we see that in Jeremiah. What's different here, though, is that God walks down that, not Abraham. Abraham cuts them, separates them, and then God walks down. So it's God who makes this promise, not Abraham making the promise to
Right.
God. There's no conditions attached.
Right.
This covenant of grace only comes from God, and I think that's a very
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's
like,
unbelievable.
And that's why, like, when I started learning about that and really starting to get into what are these covenants that God makes and how is He going about making them, because you get to the ultimate covenant, right, of Christ, right, and what's He do? Again, He asks nothing, right, but He gives everything.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about we do a marriage ceremony here,
Yeah.
where we split a room down to two, and then people
Yeah,
walk down the
that's
aisle.
true.
Is that you think there's any correlation there? Or?
I don't know. I've never thought about it in that regard, because the idea, like, so.
If I'm not true to you, I'll become like my mother-in-law.
Maybe. I mean,
man.
I think a marriage ceremony is the opposite in this regard, because how does Genesis describe it? That you're to cleave, right? And so that idea of cleaving, you think of like a knife edge, right? Where the two sides, you recognize that there's two sides, right? But they come to that point where you cannot tell the difference between the two sides anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's the marriage covenant, right? So it's actually the opposite. We're not looking like we hope this happens to
Right,
us. We're
right.
looking at we want
Right,
that
right,
point,
right.
To
Yeah.
become one.
And I think the part of the covenant is we don't want that to happen to us.
Right.
It's if we break this,
Well, right,
we
yeah,
like-
yeah,
we like that.
and that's kind of was, like you said, when two people did this covenant, that was the fear of this would be what would happen to us, right?
Yeah.
And again, God just does it so beautifully.
He does.
It's
He does.
amazing. All right, where are we going to next?
That was chapter 15. Now we come to chapter 16, and 16 is an interesting chapter because 15 we have the covenant,
16, yeah.
and 17 we have the proof of the covenant with circumcision. But then you've got this chapter 16, which is kind of just placed in the middle, and it's a mess. Like, why is this chapter here? This chapter is filled with infidelity, abuse, abandonment. This is a chapter full of hurt. And so why is it in the middle of it? And a lot of this hurt is because, most of this hurt because Abram and Sarai were impatient. And I've come to learn that when impatient reigns, pain is real close by. Like, we're patient for a reason. In verse 7, though, we find Hagar, and she's a single mom to be, stranded in the wilderness. She feels alone, vulnerable. She's making her way through the valley of despair, not because of sins of others.
Right.
Right. She was used.
Yep.
She finds herself suffering. She's far from help and hope. And how many times do we feel like this? I mean,
Right.
I think we can connect with Hagar. What's really neat, though, is where we find Hagar. So if you go to chapter 16, verse 7, and it says, "The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur." So Shur is near Egypt. So as many of us do, when we're in times of trouble, where do we go? You start heading back home.
And you had brought that up too. There's that idea of going down to Egypt, and and so
Yeah. But Hagar needs more than home. She needs God. And so God shows up. Now, this is where it gets kind of fun, and we can have a little bit of debate. Many scholars believe that this is God himself who visits Hagar.
Okay.
In fact, the technical term for this is a Christophany. It's an appearance of the Son of God before he took the flesh of Jesus. Kind of a little weird.
It is.
like your Melchizedek.
Melchizedek is
moments.
sometimes considered that. Yep.
Right. So you've got this moment where potentially Christ, before he is Christ, visits Hagar in the wilderness. And if this is true, this is actually a preview of John chapter 4, where Jesus will sit with a woman at a well. Another woman who's hurting, another woman who's in pain, another woman who's made some decisions that aren't good.
Right.
And in both cases, God heals this woman who's facing hardship. Now, what's neat is what the angel, or what God asks Hagar. And in verse 8, he says, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And I think those two questions are beautiful, because he asks her about direction and destiny. A question about her trials, but also her trajectory, and like, where are you going and what are you doing? And when we come face to face with our past and our purpose, then we're better positioned to find healing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, this is what happened, yet this is where my life should be going. And I think it's beautiful that the Son of God took this temporary body, left heaven, came down to help this rejected servant girl of all people. Right? Of all people. And what's neat is that she learns that he's a living God who sees us in our cries when we hurt. And the name of the well means the well of one who lives and sees me. He is a personal God concerned about abused people and unborn babies. He knows the future and cares for those who will trust him. And if you remember in 16:2, we meet Hagar, and she doesn't even have a name. She's called Sarah, Abram's wife. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. So she's called the female Egyptian servant. That's how she's referred to. And yet, Hagar is the only person in the Old Testament who gives God a new name. And she says in 16:13, she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roi. In this place, I have actually seen the one who sees me. And I thought it was so beautiful that when Abram and Sarai see Hagar only for what she might do, God sees her for who she is. They use her, but God sees her and provides her with this hopeful future. And I think it's just a beautiful moment of God redeeming her story. Of all the people he could go in and rescue and restore, he chooses her in this moment. And then what he asks her to do is, this was a little hard to swallow, because he asked her to go back. And I always think about, is he encouraging people who are abused to go back to their abusers? And I don't think that's the case here.
No, I don't either. But I'm going to tack on to that too. It's not just go back; it's go back and submit, right? Like that's the hard part about it. Like it's not just go back and be; it's go back and you're in your position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as I study that, you see it establishes this pattern where God reveals the future suffering can be a pathway to future blessings, and that Hagar's hardship, it will come through God's provision and protection when she returns. And it's healing. Her healing is a promise, which is a subtle indicator. One of the way God brings healing after hardship is helping us to see that good can arrive from the bad experiences in our life. Yeah. And I think that God doesn't waste experiences. And the stuff we've gone through in our life, sometimes by choice, sometimes like Hagar, not really by choice, God can still redeem those moments and use those moments and restore those moments.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the rest of that chapter too, like where he tells her, like, here's what's going to happen. You can see starting in verse 11, you have conceived and will have a son, and you will name him Ishmael. For the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. Yeah. This man will be like a wild donkey. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him, and he will live at odds with his brother. Yeah. I think that's interesting because if you look at how we look at Hagar and the status that's assigned to Hagar, right? You mentioned that that Abraham is the father of three religions, right? He's Judaism, he's Christianity, and he's Islam. It's
Muslim,
Muslim. And so a lot of thought is that Ishmael is the offspring that moves into the Islam side of things. And so just it's an interesting dynamic that
Yeah.
these three main religions all stem from this one event.
Yeah,
kind
it's
of thing.
crazy. It's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. I think when I look at chapter 16, especially in placement of 15 and 17, I go to Romans 5:20. It says, "But where sin increased, grace increased all the more."
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean God looks the other way when we sin, or we should keep messing up. Paul talks about that too in
Right,
the next
yeah.
chapter, right? What it does mean is that God's grace is always greater than our sin. Even when we blow it, God can still bring something good out of it, and that's what grace does. We look at Hagar; she's on the run, headed back to Egypt. God met her right in the middle of her mess. He saw her, cared for her, and gave her hope, and that's grace. The enemy loves to tell us if we mess up, that's it, we're stuck. That the detour we took has to be the road we stand forever. Right? The right now is right always. But that's a lie. Like Abram and Sarah, we can own our mistakes, come back to God, receive his forgiveness, and keep going. Yeah, there's probably gonna be some consequences, some regret, but grace wins. Grace keeps moving forward. And again, that quote, "The victorious Christian life is a series of new beginnings." And I think that's just such a great reminder for all of us.
Yeah.
Big breaths, and
Yeah.
this is a journey. It's a journey.
And while we're called to be like Christ, Christ knows we're not perfect. God knows we're not perfect,
Yeah.
right? Like it's known and known entity. Doesn't mean we don't try. It just means we don't beat ourselves up. I always think like you hear about medieval monks,
Yeah.
and for penance, like the wearing of hair shirts or the floggings
Yeah.
and self beatings and stuff like that. And it's like, I get it. Like you want to understand the suffering that Christ went through, but he went through that so you didn't have to.
Yeah. Speaking of hair shirts, I could use a hair hat.
Yeah.
'Cause my hair is disappearing. Okay, now we come to chapter 17. And chapter 17 is our final thing we're going to look at.
Okay.
It's referenced more than 24 times in the New Testament. And it's interesting because after chapter 16, where you see Abram's failures, not just in taking Hagar and doing that, but also in the way he treated her afterwards. He was complicit in her abuse, I feel. And so you might expect God to resist Abraham in anger, right? Instead, he keeps pursuing him in love by renewing the covenant. It's this beautiful, again, a beautiful act of God's grace. And now we talk about covenants coming with a sign.
Yep.
Noah, or God made a covenant with Adam. He gave him Eve.
Yep.
Noah, we talked about the bow.
Yep.
And now God has made a covenant with Abraham, and he's given him circumcision.
Yep.
So why did God choose to seal the covenant this way? What do you think?
I'm sure you have an answer.
I do have a
for it.
couple answers.
Number one, it set future generations aside from the pagan cultures that were there. So pagan cultures, in fact, when you get into the Mosaic law, that you see like things like no tattoos, no piercings, don't do these kinds of things. This was something that other cultures weren't doing. That was unique to the beginnings. Even though we don't have Judaism yet, like this is going to be that set forth sign. So that's my main argument for it. I don't know what you got.
Yeah, I mean, it's a physical marking.
Yeah.
It tends a daily reminder of the spiritual marking of faith. It goes back to Genesis 3:15, where the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, and the seed-generating organ of a man is cut here. And so there's a daily reminder of that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, a
Okay,
little bit.
yeah.
Now, what's the process of circumcision? Let me show you here real quick.
It's a family show.
Not anymore. So it involves cutting away.
Yeah,
Right. And
right.
Again, it's supposed to happen on a man's 8th day, which is a sign. We know the 8th day is new creation.
Yes.
Right? And so we just 7 days, and 8th day is new creation. And so his participation in the covenant.
Okay.
And the purpose of, again, is to mark out the people of God, which we talked about.
Yep.
And on the cross, we see Christ crucified naked in a public display as one who's been cut off from his people. He's carried outside of the gate. He's separated from God. He's literally bearing the weight of the curse of God for us. Jesus takes the punishment of the covenant so we can receive the promise of the covenant. And this sign of this physical circumcision points forward to that spiritual reality of who Christ is. I think it's just a beautiful moment. Now, Paul will later talk about circumcision. He has
Yep.
some thoughts about circumcision.
Yep, and the apostles do too. Like,
Yeah.
so this it's funny because it is so ingrained to the people of Israel that it becomes a point of contention in the early church, in the early Christian church. And so you literally have people who separate over this idea.
Yeah.
And so the idea then gets taken to the apostles,
Yeah.
the 11 apostles that remain after Christ's crucifixion, and asked, like, because the thought is, like, Christianity was only for the Jewish people,
Yeah.
right? Like God's chosen people, that this was only for them. And so the argument was taken, and so you had to become a Jew before you could become a Christian. And so how do you become a Jewish person is you have to undergo the circumcision, right? So when Christianity is being brought to the Gentiles, there's a thought that they have to be converted into Judaism, and then they can become the Christianity. And the apostles sat down and they said, look, we don't want to impose anything more restrictive on anyone than it has to be.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is, no, you don't have to do this, right? They lay down a couple other rules, like refrain from sexual immorality, don't drink blood, and
Eat
meat that's been
blood,
strangled.
Yeah.
So but it's an interesting point, because people are trying to continue this covenant with God, and God took that away.
Yeah. And that's where the idea of circumcision of the heart.
Right.
Right. We no longer, like, a physical circumcision is messy. It's disgusting. It's intimate. Just like our sin, messy, disgusting, and intimate.
Well, just like the sacrificial system, at the same time, all that gets removed by the
Christ.
sacrifice of Christ.
Right. And that's the thing. When we are united to Christ by faith, his circumcision becomes our circumcision. Both the physical he experienced on the 8th day and the figurative he experienced on the cross. And Warren Wiesby wrote this: Paul takes a hard line against those who would require circumcision from the new Gentile converts. Why? Because to require circumcision is to say that the individual does not share the identity of Christ. I thought that was cool. Because if we say we're in Christ, we're in Christ.
Right.
And we want to add to that.
Right.
And it's just a neat little moment there. So that's what was left from, I didn't put in the sermon. And it was pretty long. It felt long this week.
I didn't think so.
No,
I think
I had a lot of words.
I think you did. I think you did go longer than I thought you would, but there's a difference between being long and feeling long, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, time wise, yes, but I thought it was compelling. I thought it was good. I thought I had, and really when again you tie that up, and you always do a really nice job of tying it up into a bow at the end, and making these ideas that maybe don't always seem to fit together.
Yeah.
You bring them. You have a good way of bringing them.
I try. That's one of
together.
my when I begin. I would begin with the end in mind. I always think of it like as a Simpsons episode. This is so inappropriate. Like if you watch a Simpsons episode, it begins all over the place, and there's this and this and this. By the end, it all kind of like boom together. And so the way I see stories is trying to begin with the end. What's the problem? What's the solution? And then trying to build from there. But that's only because of God's grace. I'm an idiot, honestly, up there. It's all God's grace. It's
100%.
It's all Him.
I was actually just telling Brian that last night. I'm like, I should never be up on the podium.
I agree.
Like I am an idiot up there, and
I
so
agree. I agree. You should never be up there.
yeah, you still keep putting me up there. So I tried everything I can.
I know. Well, now we come to everybody's favorite part of the episode. This would be the moment. Oh yeah, this is the song that won the contest.
In the ancient scrolls, a name appears so sleek. Melchizedek, the priest and king, so unique.
So unique.
No father, no mother, no beginning, no end.
We had to play the whole song.
I'm waiting on you.
Where the scriptures bend. Melchizedek, moment breaking it down.
Maybe we should shorten that up a little. That's a little long.
A priestly king with a heavenly.
Well, okay, so try to make this quick as possible. So
This is gonna be hard.
This is hard because
He's in the middle of my
you
story.
literally
Skipped
skipped
over
over him. It's like the one point we could have talked about him on stage, and you're like, nope.
I know he's in chapter 14, right?
Yeah.
No, 13, 14.
Yeah.
13. 14. Right?
Is it 14? I always forget. Like he's so short in there.
Yeah, 14.
Yeah.
After his so this is the reading. After his return from the defeat of that person and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of whatever. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of the God Most High, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the God Most High who has delivered your enemy into your hand." And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to the Lord God Almighty, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or strap sand from anything that is yours." You should say, "I have made Abram rich," blah, 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 blah. So, so he meets this guy and he gives him a tenth of everything.
Yeah. So
What is going on?
okay, so that's a great question. And so the thing that I was thinking about, because it's interesting that you brought up about Hagar, this is some people attribute this to being one of those Christophanies, that this is Christ before he embodies himself as a human, that shows up, right? He has all of these different aspects of God, and in a pagan world, as you began for Abraham, in a pagan world where there are polytheistic all across the board, you have this one guy who, Abraham, we get God talks to Abraham, says, "Look, I'm Yahweh, I'm the God Most High," right? And then you have this random stranger that comes out and he's like, "Hey, praise be to the God Most High, praise be to Yahweh," essentially, and it's like it's just, again, in one of those mysterious things that ends up happening. And you have the wine and the bread, right? So you have that Christ component. You have the 10th, which is the 10th, what we call a tithe, is not even established until Moses, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of the law of the temple, essentially. And so here you have an early representation of that Mosaic law that shows up. You have Salem, peace, right? It's the early name for Jerusalem. It's like all these pieces just kind of fall together, and it makes him so bizarre and so weird. But he's a big. I think he's a big point in Abraham's life. I mean, it really it's because. Why else are we talking about him?
Right.
Like, what is the point of him in this story?
Right.
He's got it. It's got to be a big point.
And what is the point of him in this story?
That's the question. No. So
that's why I didn't talk about him on Sunday.
Yeah, I know, because it's such a bizarre point. And so I honestly believe it's that idea of God has a plan, right? And so God, when he inspired Moses to write the story of Abraham, right? He says he inspires him to include this component. Why? Because when you travel into our book that we always go to, Hebrews, right? It is so important to the story of Hebrews, to explaining to the Jewish people. Again, it's using this story to explain Christ. And so when I said it's a Christophany, there's a lot of people who believe that. There are some who will argue against that too, because if it's really Christophany, why are we using it to explain how Christ is like Melchizedek, right? That we would just say Christ is Melchizedek, and so you have. I always loved just the thought of early on in the story of Abraham, there's like 3 weird visits, right? There's the Hagar one, there's the Melchizedek one, and then there's the strangers at the tent, right? And I don't know, just because I think it's fun, I love to think like this is Christ in all 3 instances.
That's interesting, because you also have a triune God, and so you have 3 visits. Okay.
Right.
Next week, Chris is on the mic next week.
I am,
And what are we talking about next week?
We are talking about a judge. So I was sitting when I was writing, I was thinking, I don't know that we've ever gone through the book of Judges at all. I don't think it's hit very often. And so it'll be interesting, because we'll talk a little bit about what that book is really about, and we're going to focus in on one particular judge. There's like 3 of them that we could have gone with, and so I went with one because I love the story behind him, and his name is Gideon.
Yeah, and you love this. You remember when we first began? You're like, I wanted to.
This was one because and it's fun because even though I read this story, I always focused on the wrong part, I guess, because there's the part of why we consider him great. But then there's the rest of it.
That's
and
awesome.
So it'll be a fun little story.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear it. Looking forward to it. That's all we got. I don't know. You got anything else or?
I don't think so. So yeah,
we did it in the morning.
I know it was morning time.
Got the whole afternoon to do nothing now.
Well, I still have work to do, but
you
do too. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening. Smash that like button and subscribe.
Yeah,
It's
bye.
Chris and Steve with the mic in hand, digging through truths that don't quite land. The bits and pieces that didn't get said, from the pulpit to the podcast instead. Not for Sunday mornings, no halos here. We're breaking it down with a laugh and a cheer. Knowledge nuggets flying wild and free. Welcome to the cave. sauce, grab your coffee.